Selling the dream, not the doom. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. America is a spirit, not just a plot of land. And in order to buoy that spirit, in order to keep that spirit afloat, we need to focus on the things of the spirit, not the doom and gloom of the material world. And look, I'm as guilty as anybody pointing out the bad going on in America. But every now and then, every once in a while, we have to remember, we have to reflect upon, we have to tell our children about what makes America so great in the first place. And before I get into all that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, containing my twice weekly Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcasts. You may get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network, the news/faith-based platform of Pastor Jack Hibbs out in California, who has so kindly picked up Bold and Blunt to include among his esteemed offerings on his platform. And guess what? You can get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are offered. And let me quickly mention one more thing. The Washington Times has this new great product called Higher Ground. It's put together by Washington Times' Billy Hallowell and Mark Kellner. And I got to tell you, it's one of the best things the Washington Times is putting out right now. It is all about faith in modern culture and politics. It contains podcasts, it contains commentaries, it contains news reports, and it's a newsletter that you can subscribe to, but it's also a podcast that you can listen in on. So go to Washington Times and check out that Higher Ground offering. You won't be disappointed. So if somebody were to come up to you today and ask you, what is so great about America anyway? Do you have an answer prepared? You should know off the top of your head. You should be able to rattle off 10, 20, 30 or more things that make America so exceptional. And I got to say, the number one thing that comes to my mind if people ask me what is so great about America, it's the fact that our rights come from God. And government is only there to preserve and protect those rights. Government is subservient. The President of the United States is a humble servant to you, John Q. taxpayer, or Jane Q. citizen. That's amazing when you think about it. What a radical idea that founding fathers brought to fruition in this country, right? Religious freedom, the fact that you can sit out in an open park and read your Bible, or gather with friends in a public place, in a coffee shop, and hold a Bible study. You know, there's some countries you can't do that. You'll get arrested for doing that. I want to go back to the idea of God-given individual liberties, though, because to me that is all that America is about, and that is all that is great about America. Everything else flows from there, right? All your freedoms, think about it. All freedoms lead back to God and the notion of God-given individual liberties. That clarifies a lot because it makes all the battles that we have going on in this country all about one thing, really, in the end, about bringing God back on the forefront of America's culture and politics, of everything about America. All battles, all roads lead back to that concept. But I want to tell a quick story. A few years ago, I was asked to be part of this panel for this public radio station event. And they had different people on the panel talking about rights and liberties and so forth. And before I even accepted, I knew I was going into the lion's den, right? Because first off, public radio typically leans left. But second off, some of the guests they had were definitely out there on the left. And to me, that was a great event because it's great preaching to the choir, but I don't know how fruitful that is about advancing not just the Word of God, but also the notion of liberty in America, right? If you constantly just talk to people who already agree with you, how is that spreading anything? How is that doing anything toward advancing liberty, advancing God's word? So I was excited to go to this event. And I have to say, when I went to the event and I fielded certain questions, there were questions about racism in America. And I brought up about, hey, Barack Obama, black dude, president, not just once, but twice, and elected president with a large percentage of American white voters. So that whole notion of inherent racism and systemic racism sort of falls flat on the presidential years of Barack Obama. I know the left doesn't see it this way. I know Democrats still insist on calling out systemic racism in America as a means of crumbling America from within, of dividing America into different smaller groups that they can then swoop in and conquer, exploit and conquer, because Democrats do love their race cards. I know that there are plenty out there who disagree with it, but by and large, when you have a president of the United States, ostensibly the most powerful man in the universe, right, black, then you can kind of say, wow, America's turned a corner on racism, especially when the only reason he's in that White House office in the first place is because a large percentage of white voters put him there. Not just once, twice. So anyhow, I'm making my case on stage, and it's angering my fellow panelists, which, it comes with the territory of being in a lion's den. But what got me is after, right? Oh, and also on the stage, we were talking about healthcare and Obamacare. And my viewpoint was taxpayer-funded healthcare in America was a travesty. It was totally contrary to what founding fathers wanted in terms of limits on government. And also that Republicans had failed conservatives by sort of sidestepping that point and at first silently and then openly agreeing with the idea of healthcare as a right, because it never was about healthcare as a right. It was about taxpayer-funded healthcare as a right. And Republicans sort of sidestepped that argument and then, of course, caved. And thank you, John McCain, with your lumbering thumbs up. I will never forget that image on the congressional floor. But anyhow, I digress. And back to this. Again, I was making the point, in addition to the argument that systemic racism in America does not exist today, also making the point that taxpayer-funded health care was abhorrent in a free society such as America still is. And after the panel, after fielding the fire from fellow panelists, I was then approached by this woman from Canada. She identified herself as from Canada. She was a younger woman, maybe late 20s, early 30s, and she got in my face, about 2 inches from my face, and proceeded to just dress me down to tell me how dangerous my speech and thoughts were, which I found very interesting because, of course, in America, there is no such thing as dangerous speech or hate thoughts and things like that. We don't prosecute based on somebody's thoughts. And this whole notion of hate speech that started 20 years ago or so, right, has now progressed to the point where the younger generation in America has moved into the camp of thinking similarly to this Canadian woman, that some speech needs to be controlled, that yes, free speech is good, but some free speech is dangerous. And this is sort of where America's public school system has headed with our younger generations, which is why you are having a lot of woke politicians and woke corporations out there get by with their wokeness, because we have younger generations that are largely triggered by speech and think that if they feel bad over something you say, that it's not incumbent on them to deal with it, but it's incumbent on you to completely change your speech and more than that, apologize for daring to offend them. So anyhow, going back to the beginning of this podcast, selling the dream, not the doom, these are doom-filled times when you consider things like this, when you consider things like Canada's propaganda feeding into the minds of our youth through our public school system, and America moving more and more toward a nation where freedoms are dictated by government instead of being dictated by God, instead of being gifted by God, I guess is the better word. But the dream still exists. So we have this doom, right? And I tell that story about that panel that I was on because that was years and years ago, and you can see how that thought, how that ideology has just progressed throughout America, how it is infiltrated and spread, and how it's becoming part and parcel of accepted culture and politics nowadays. But that's the doom. The dream of America is still there. We are still a nation where rights come from God. The only difference between us now and 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 200 years ago, is that we are not insisting on that greatness, that exceptionalism any longer. We have strayed from that path. We have allowed ourselves to stray from the path of God-given individual liberty. So somebody asked me, what's so great about America? I'm still standing strong on the notion that America's greatness comes from the idea that our rights come from a creator. They are inherent, they are inalienable, and government has no right to take them or give them. Government has no right to do anything with these inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, except stand back and support them. Limits on government, fewer limits on the people. That's what's so great about America. That's my definition of American exceptionalism. And if somebody asks me, what's so great about America anyhow? What is this American dream thing? What's so great about the American dream? Is the American dream dead? To answer that last, no, the American dream is not dead. The American dream is individualism, not collectivism. You want to know what else is great about America? We give. America consistently, of all nations in the world, America gives. And America doesn't just give through nonprofit organizations overseas. We have it embedded in our government. Our tax dollars fund giving efforts around the world to promote American ideals, to promote freedom and equality around the world. And then we give internally. When someone is hurting in America, we turn around and we give. We donate. We give to our churches. We give to our local nonprofits. We build homes for the homeless. We give food to the hungry. This is what America does because Americans care. Americans love based on largely Christian duty, Christian love, Judeo-Christian principles. That makes America great. That is why America is so exceptional. And one other quick thing that makes America so great, we have an all-volunteer military force. All volunteer. We don't force people to serve in this country. We don't force them to serve the government interests based on fear, based on forced service. No, we have an all-volunteer force of people who love their country so much, who love America so much, that they are willing to make the sacrifices in their own personal lives to step up to the plate, sign on the dotted line, and pledge to defend America from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they serve. And they serve in some places of the world that are pretty dangerous. And some of them give all. Some of them sacrifice all for service of this nation. And so I have a guest today who wants to give back to these veterans, to these great heroes of America, and he does it in a very interesting way, in a very eye-catching way, which is the whole point. He has an endeavor called Save the Brave. It's a nonprofit, savethebrave.org. And one of the programs that he does is ride his motorcycle through various states in a very short time frame, stopping at select specific spots along the way to call attention to veteran suicides, which is a sad and sorry statistic, right? I mean, that's one of the ultimate sadnesses. Somebody goes and defends this nation, defends the freedom of this nation, gives up his or her life and time in this sacrifice, and then, for whatever reason, commits suicide following deployment, following service to this nation. So savethebrave.org has a whole host of programs. Go to the website and find out what they do. One of the things they do is Executive Director Major Scott Huesing, U.S. Marine Corps retired, has for the last few years, started this motorcycle ride through 9 states over the course of 9 days to raise awareness for veteran suicides and their families. And he is also the best-selling author of Echo in Ramadi. So, Scott, thank you so much for taking time out of your ride, out of your journey, to be on Bold and Blunt today. It is great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on the show and sharing one very important story to us as an organization and the veteran community. It's really great to be with you today.
And it's very important for all of America, all of American patriots who are in massive support of our nation's veterans. You are Executive Director of Save the Brave, and as part of that, you are finishing a 9-day, 9-state ride on your Harley to draw attention to veteran suicides. Tell a little bit about how this project got started.
Well, we started Save the Brave 8 years ago, and like a lot of things in the veteran community, it was born through sacrifice and loss and some tragedy when one of my squad leaders committed suicide, Simon Litke, and we flew a bunch of the Marines up to Minnesota to support the family, and it has just grown since then. And sadly, 4 years ago, my good friend and high school mate, Dave White, committed suicide. His mom asked me to come to South Carolina and give the remarks at the funeral, and height of COVID, no flights, so I hopped on my Harley, and I rode across the country and back that year in 2020, 5,150 miles, and my partner, Nick Velez, who was also one of my Marines that served under my command in Ramadi, Iraq, started sharing it, and it just continued to become this Forrest Gump-like event, and, friends of mine, and, my good friend AJ Rice, who's with, Publius PR, started sharing it, and hundreds and thousands of riders just started joining me along the way. And so it's been a really unifying event that started during one of the worst times in America, COVID, where people were isolated, and we kind of recognized this. So Marines being Marines, they kind of shamed me into doing it the next year. They said, "Hey, sir, you going to ride again this year?" I'm like, "Nope, it was a one-time deal." They're like, "Come on, sir." And I did it. So I got on my bike the next year, and we're going to continue to do this because last year we connected over 10,000 veterans. And it's not just veterans, but it's the local communities that come out and support to meet those who serve their country. It really exposed to me the best of the human condition, Cheryl. And that is coming from gas stations to small businesses. Everywhere we go, we just continue to see this outpour of support to understand that we're not just trying to raise awareness for veteran suicide. We're trying to prevent it. That's really the goal, is to get veterans who think they're in that point of no return to understand that there are thousands of people that love you, they care about you, they want to support you, and I see that city after city every year I do this ride.
So I want to talk about the specifics on how you organize this ride and so forth. But before we get into that, I want to focus on really what it's all about. Veteran suicide. Are people by and large aware of how common that is? What are the statistics? And just talk a little bit about that.
Well, there's a number that's thrown around a lot, 22 a day. Those numbers and those statistics aren't representative of what we're really losing in the veteran community to suicide, because those are only numbers that are reported through the DOD and through the VA. So if you've got veterans from every generation, from Korea to Vietnam to modern day warriors that are committing suicide, sometimes we don't even know the actual number. But the statistics for us, they're not statistics. These are our friends. These are Marines that served under my command. I've lost 12 personally to suicide, and these
12
served alongside of me.
12 you've known personally?
That's just in commands. There's others that I know personally that have committed suicide. And, one of the guys that dropped everything to make sure I was safe on the road the very first year to do it, Pete Turner, he is a veteran, and he said, I don't want you going on the road for 16 days to your buddy's funeral alone. So he drops everything he's doing. He comes with me. And then 2 years later, Pete's brother, who was a Marine, commits suicide. And so this is a very personal issue to us. Pete's sitting in the courtyard right here in Atlanta, Georgia with me today eating breakfast. Every year he comes out and does it. And one of the reasons it's so important to take care of the families that are left behind, we started a scholarship fund for the children and deserving family members of veterans that committed suicide. And last year was the first year we presented a check to Pete's niece and went to San Francisco and gave her a check for $10,000. And we have to take care of those that are left behind too. So the statistics and what the country's seeing, like it's not representative of the actual numbers, but for us it's a very personal issue, and we want to really not only focus on that, but this year as we ride across the country, we're truly trying to educate those that don't know the greatness of our veteran tribe too, and how successful they are once they take the uniform off. I mean, we've got guys out here, Cheryl, and women that if you look past the leather and the tattoos and the chrome and the Harleys, these people are not just veterans who serve their country, but they're also doctors and lawyers and professionals and leaders in the private sector, and they're doing great things. So we got to stop focusing really solely on all the darkness the veteran nonprofits are sharing, and really focus on a lot of the brightness. And as the executive director of Save the Brave, that's kind of a double-edged sword. I'll be quite honest, because you could play on the heartstrings of America and say, yeah, veteran suicide, it's sadness and darkness, and you have to give, and you have to donate, and you have to do this. What I'd rather focus on is share the brightness, share all the greatness, so guys are empowered to understand that, man, there's so much more out there, and I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to stay on mission. I'm going to stay connected. That's really what we want to do.
So when you go about to organize this trip, how does it work? Do you reach out to specific areas in the 9 states and set up, pre-schedule appointed times to arrive, and then the locals there do an advertising or reach out to other veterans and interested members of the community to come and visit with you? How does that work?
Yes, exactly. We just employ the same Marine Corps planning process that's tried, true, and tested for 248 years, and I run it in a very decentralized model. I've got team leads in every city, and then they build a little cadre of support from local businesses, event planners, local Harley dealerships in some cases, and then donors and supporters that want to come to the event. So on a typical day, we'll wake up early and get out before the heat, and we'll ride anywhere from 300 to 500 miles in one day. And then we usually hit a target at about 6 p.m., and the event goes from 6 to 10, like it is today in Savannah, Georgia, at Baker McCullough. And then we rinse and repeat, and we do that 9 cities, 9 days straight. And it's tiring. It's a very physical ride. And in Arizona, we hit 121. It was the hottest I've ever hit on this ride. And people will continue to ask me, too. They say, why do you plan it every year in July? Why'd you pick July? I said, look, I didn't pick the month. The month picked me. And it's kind of become a metaphor, because everybody in life, you, me, military, civilian, doesn't matter. Everybody deals with stress and anxiety or depression or some sort of friction in their life. And we understand that. And it's not lost on me as people come in and join us every single year. But it's a very physical ride. And one of the things that was kind of interesting was the people riding with me. I thought at one point, I said, man, these are really the alphas. These are really the meat eaters out there that can endure this type of heat and wind and the hours we put on the road. And that kind of inspires me to continue to ride. And we've had guys way younger than me, and I had a guy last year. His name was Gus. He's a Marine, Vietnam vet, 83 years old. He rode with me from Georgia all the way to South Carolina, to Charleston. We had a drink. I signed a book for him. He said, Semper Fi, got back on his bike and rode another 4 hours back. It was so inspiring to think that, man, what am I going to be doing in another 3 years? Am I still going to be able to grab the handlebars? So those stories just abound as we ride every year. So it's a very cool, unifying event. And, if people want to find out about it, they can just go to savethebrave.org on our website or follow us on Instagram. We're cataloging all of this electronically on social media too, and we're sharing all of these great stories and testimonials, because that's honestly how we measure our success. It is, as far as metrics go, it's a very qualitative metric, because it comes back to us when we see these veterans reconnect with us every single year. It's crazy.
So what do you do in the poor weather, rainstorms and so forth? Do you pull over? And how many people ride with you?
I'm the only guy who's crazy enough to ride the whole way. I have people that say, hey, I want to do the ride, but they haven't really stepped up yet. But we're going to fix that. We're going to create opportunity next year for riders to start on one coast and finish on the other coast. But we've had as few as 5 guys on the road, and then there's times where we have 20, 50, and it's something pretty impressive to see. Anybody that's ever seen, let alone 10 motorcycles going down the road in an escort. We had 50 in Dallas, and we had police, fire escort, running red lights through North Dallas for 45 minutes to Marty B's place. I had the longest police escort this year from Pecos, Texas to Odessa, 74 miles. State troopers and county sheriffs escort us the whole way. It's really overwhelming, and every time I look in my rearview mirror and I see all of those veterans and people from the local communities out riding with me, I think, man, this is support. Like, if there's ever a veteran out there that thinks that people don't care or they don't love you, like, I look at that tiny piece of glass show, I'm like, man, this is what people need to see. And it's a lot of work to organize it and put it all together, even at the local level, but for other people to see that, it should be inspiring to them to understand that, man, there's a ton of support out here, and we're just doing our small part.
So what do you do in the poor weather, in rainstorms?
When it rains, we ride through. If it's too bad, we pull over. But we're pretty accustomed to operating in harsh conditions. But we stay completely safe. We have two escort vehicles, 2 vans, so if we have a mechanical breakdown, we take care of that. We have full med kit on board if there's ever an injury or anything. We've luckily never had an incident, but we got a trained EMT with us. He's one of my riders, Eric Hicks. He's a Dallas firefighter, and he rides with me from Dallas all the way to the other coast every single year. He's our Save the Braves outreach coordinator down there. So it's we've always got a plan. We make sure we do it safe and it's fun for everybody, and just has it's got to have kind of a cool factor, and we've done that. We continue to grow, and just here in Fairburn, Georgia yesterday, probably 3 times the amount of attendees at Cochran Mills Brewing in Fairburn, Georgia this year, and everybody that showed up said, I can't wait to do it next year. So there's no real pressure on me to do it, but we're going to keep doing it. It's really a great event, and it's well worth the 10 days. I hit the pause button, and it allows me to think inside the helmet and reflect and do my own self-care as well. So there's a lot of added benefits to it for me.
Just a couple more questions, Scott. How do you raise money for this, and how can people contribute?
Well, that's a great question, because everything we do for the programs that we provide through Save the Brave are offshore fishing program, which is the first thing we did. One fishing trip 8 years ago. We did 32 last year. This year we have 20 offshore fishing trips planned. We have a jiu-jitsu program that is just really blowing up, that people love it. And then the scholarship fund all comes through private donations, and they do that by going to savethebrave.org. Click on the donate tab. If you want to join the fundraise, we have a peer-to-peer competition for the ride. So this is an event that falls underneath the programs, and we use this as our summer fundraiser. And our goal this year is $100,000, and we're inching closer and closer to that this year. But we have donors and supporters along the way at all of these events. But if you can't ride, you can still donate, and you can still make an impact. And I try and remind people as kind of a call to action that just think about what you spend $50 on, a half a tank of gas or $10 on a coffee. We've all got money, but the real thing is you're making an impact. All of the funds and donations go back to our programs, and they help veterans who are struggling. And those people are out there. These men and women who have never had that release. They've never had that outlet. They've never had that connection. So we're trying to provide that opportunity to connect veterans, empower them to show them what right looks like, and continue to serve our own community. So it's easy for people to donate. Just go to savethebrave.org, click a recurring monthly donation, maybe $10, maybe $20, and you're going to be making a huge difference in someone's life. And, you may never see it, but there's those times, too, where the phone might ring and someone might, on the other end, pick up and say, thank you, I'm a recipient of this scholarship, or I'm a recipient of, one of these trips, and it changed my life. That's really the magic when it really happens and that connection is made.
And I just have one more question. Do you have to hang up, or do you have time for one more question?
We're great. Yeah, we're fine.
So just going back to the basic mission of your organization, why, and I don't know how quickly you can sum this up, but why veteran suicides? What's going on with members of the military? Is it that they see things overseas that are so devastating, it just destroys them internally? What's the reason behind the suicides?
Man, I tell you, that's such a great question, and I honestly, it's so hard for me to do the math on this. I don't have a PhD hanging on my wall, but I do know that under those types of conditions, in the military alone is a very high-stress environment. And then you compound that with combat and seeing some of the worst things that humanity has to offer. And a lot of people can't compartmentalize that, or they do, and when they try to unpack it, it manifests in different ways. So, it doesn't discriminate against age, rank, race, sex, gender. We've seen it all, and that's just, something that we're trying to figure out. But we do understand that what we're doing at Save the Brave and many other great veteran nonprofits, we're really filling a gap, and filling that gap that organizations like the VA or government organizations that are so big, they're either unwilling or incapable of doing. And I think that that's something that we've built as part of this support network with all veteran nonprofits to give our veteran tribe opportunities so that they can find what's right for them, whatever that modality is, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's horses, whether it's riding your Harley, whether it's fishing. There's something out there for all veterans. And people that want to support, they need to understand that this is how we do it. And there's no better pill or vaccination than connection. And that really is the cure, in our opinion.
What a great answer. Thank you. And Scott Huesing, Executive Director of Save the Brave. What a great endeavor. What a great campaign. Thank you for taking time off your trip to speak with me.
Oh, it's my honor. And again, if people want to find out more, just go to savethebrave.org and follow us on Instagram, too, at savethebrave.org, and you'll see all these amazing stories. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. You are very welcome. SaveTheBrave.org, that's the website. Go there, check out all they do for veterans families, for ultimately America's freedoms. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to subscribe to Bold and Blunt, you may do so by going to WashingtonTimes.com, Edify.app, Real Life Network, or guess what? Wherever podcasts are offered. And if you are already a subscriber, I really appreciate it. Thank you again for listening. Tune in next time. And in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.